The tear sliding down Eleanor Mitchell's cheek caught the last golden rays of the setting sun as she stumbled along the dusty road to Willow Creek's train depot. It was 1878, and the promise of a new life had twisted into something unrecognizable, something that made her chest ache with each ragged breath. Eleanor clutched her small carpet bag tighter, the worn leather handle digging into her palm. Her wedding dress, carefully packed inside, would never be worn now. Not after what she had discovered about Thomas Bradford, the man she had agreed to marry through a series of hopeful letters exchanged over 6 months. The depot appeared on the horizon, a simple wooden structure that represented both escape and defeat. Eleanor had spent nearly all her savings on the train ticket that had brought her to this remote corner of Wyoming territory. Now she would use what little remained to flee, though she had no clear destination in mind. Anywhere but here. Anywhere but forward into the arms of a man who had lied about everything: his fortune, his ranch, even his intentions. Another sob escaped her lips as she remembered the cold look in Thomas's eyes when she had confronted him about the deception. "You'll learn to accept it," he had said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Women always do." Eleanor had waited until he left for the saloon before gathering her few possessions and slipping away. Night was falling rapidly now, and the air had grown cool. She pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Miss, are you all right?" The deep voice startled Eleanor. She whirled around to find a tall man astride a chestnut mare. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy: denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, leather vest, and boots that had seen many miles. I'm fine," Eleanor said, hastily wiping away her tears. "Just on my way to catch the evening train." The cowboy dismounted with surprising grace for a man his size. As he stepped closer, she could see his eyes, a striking shade of blue that reminded her of the summer sky back home in Boston. "Evening train left an hour ago," he said gently. "Next one's not until tomorrow afternoon." Eleanor felt her heart sink. "No, that can't be right. I was told," her voice broke. She had been mistaken about the schedule, just as she had been mistaken about so many things since arriving in this wilderness. The cowboy studied her face. "You're running from something?" It wasn't a question. Eleanor straightened her spine. "My affairs are my own, sir." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, madam, they are." He extended his hand. "Yates Donovan, I own a ranch about 5 miles from here." Eleanor hesitated before accepting his handshake. "Eleanor Mitchell." "Miss Mitchell, it'll be dark soon. Not safe for a lady to be waiting alone at the depot all night." He gestured toward the town. "Willow Creek's got a decent hotel. I'd be happy to escort you there." Eleanor glanced back at the road she had just traveled. Thomas might have discovered her absence by now. The thought of encountering him again made her stomach clench with dread. "I can't go back to town," she said quietly. Yates Donovan seemed to understand without further explanation. He was silent for a moment, considering. "You still have a choice, you know," he said finally. "Whatever you're running from, there might be another way forward." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "I hardly see how." "Sometimes the path isn't clear until you stop running and take stock of where you are." He leaned against his saddle. "My sister Rose lives at the ranch. She's always complaining about needing help with the household. If you need somewhere to stay until you figure things out, we could use an extra pair of hands." Eleanor stared at him, suspicious of this unexpected kindness. "Why would you help a stranger?" Yates shrugged. "Been stranded myself a time or two, know what it's like to need a helping hand." He looked toward the darkening sky. "Besides, can't in good conscience leave a lady alone out here with night coming on." Eleanor weighed her options. She had nowhere to go, very little money, and the next train wasn't until tomorrow. This cowboy seemed decent enough, and the mention of his sister provided some reassurance. I suppose I could help out for a day or two," she said hesitantly. "Until the next train." Yates nodded. "Fair enough." He reached for her carpet bag. "May I?" Eleanor reluctantly handed it over, watching as he secured it to his saddle. "Ever ridden before?" he asked. "Not since I was a child," Eleanor admitted. Yates held the reins of his horse. "This is Penny. She's gentle as they come." He offered his hand. "I'll walk alongside." Eleanor looked once more at the depot, then back at the strange cowboy with kind eyes. She took a deep breath and placed her hand in his, allowing him to help her into the saddle. As they set off down the road, Eleanor felt a curious mix of fear and relief. She had no idea what awaited her at Yates Donovan's ranch, but at least she wasn't alone anymore. The journey to the Donovan ranch took longer than Eleanor expected. The dirt road wound through rolling hills covered in sagebrush and prairie grass, illuminated now only by a bright three-quarter moon. The horse's steady gait rocked Eleanor gently, and despite her exhaustion, she remained alert, scanning the unfamiliar landscape. "Not much further," Yates said, breaking a long silence between them. "Just over that ridge." Eleanor nodded, though she wasn't sure he could see the gesture in the darkness. "Mr. Donovan, I feel I should explain." "No need," he interrupted. "Whatever brought you to that road crying isn't my business unless you want it to be." His directness was startling but somehow comforting. In Boston, conversations were veiled in layers of politeness and subterfuge. Out here, it seemed words were treated as precious commodities not to be wasted. "I came west to marry a man I had never met," Eleanor found herself saying. "Thomas Bradford, do you know him?" Yates was quiet for a moment. "I know of him. He owns the hardware store in town." "Yes, that's right," Eleanor said bitterly. "Except in his letters, he was a prosperous rancher with a grand home and servants. He described a life that doesn't exist." "Mail-order bride," Yates stated flatly. Eleanor flinched at the crude term. "I prefer to think of it as a correspondence courtship. We exchanged letters for months. He seemed kind, honest," she sighed. "I should have known better." "Hard times make people desperate," Yates said. "Him for lying, you for believing," Eleanor bristled. "I wasn't desperate, I was hopeful." Yates glanced up at her, his expression softening in the moonlight. "Didn't mean any offense, Miss Mitchell. Hope's a fine thing, too rare out here." They crested the ridge, and Eleanor gasped softly. Below them lay a modest but well-kept ranch. A two-story house with a wide porch stood near a large barn and several smaller outbuildings. A corral contained shadowy figures of horses, and a small creek glinted silver in the moonlight as it curved around the property. "It's not much," Yates said, "but it's home." To Eleanor, who had spent the past 2 nights in a cramped room above the general store in Willow Creek, the Donovan Ranch looked like paradise. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. As they approached, a dog began barking, and moments later the front door opened, spilling golden lamplight onto the porch. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. "Yates, is that you?" she called out. "It's me, Rose," he answered, "and I've brought a guest." By the time they reached the house, Rose Donovan had descended the porch steps. She was a petite woman with the same striking blue eyes as her brother, though her hair was a lighter shade of brown, almost honey-colored in the lamplight. "Rose, this is Miss Eleanor Mitchell," Yates said as he helped Eleanor dismount. "She needs a place to stay for a night or two. Miss Mitchell, my sister, Rose." Rose's curious gaze took in Eleanor's city clothes and obvious exhaustion. To Eleanor's relief, she asked no questions, merely smiled warmly and said, "You're just in time for supper. Come in out of the night air." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, with well-worn furniture arranged around it. A large dining table stood near windows that would offer a view of the property in daylight. Everything was scrupulously clean, though obviously used and cared for. "Sit down, please," Rose said, gesturing to the table where 3 places were already set. "I'll add another plate." "I don't want to impose," Eleanor began. "Nonsense," Rose replied firmly. "Any friend of Yates is welcome here. Miss Mitchell and I just met, actually," Yates said as he hung his hat on a peg by the door. "Found her on the road to the depot." Rose's eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded. "Well, you're still welcome. Must be hungry after your journey." While Rose bustled about the kitchen, Yates excused himself to tend to his horse. Left alone, Eleanor took the opportunity to observe her surroundings more carefully. Family photographs hung on the walls, and a bookshelf contained a surprising number of volumes. A half-finished quilt was draped over a chair near the fireplace, and a cat slept contentedly on a cushion nearby. It was nothing like the grand Boston home she had left behind, nor the elaborate ranch Thomas had described in his letters. Yet there was a warmth here, a sense of belonging that made her heart ache with a strange mixture of envy and comfort. Rose returned with a steaming pot. "Hope you like beef stew, it's what we've got tonight." "It smells wonderful," Eleanor said truthfully. The rich aroma made her realize how hungry she was. Rose sat down across from her. "So, Miss Mitchell, where are you from?" "Boston," Eleanor answered. "And please call me Eleanor." "Boston." "That's quite a journey." Rose studied her with open curiosity. "What brings you all the way out to Wyoming territory?" Before Eleanor could formulate a response, Yates returned. "Rose, Miss Mitchell's tired. Let's not pester her with questions." Rose looked chastened. "Of course." "I'm sorry, Eleanor." "It's all right," Eleanor said. I came to marry, but things didn't work out as planned." Understanding dawned on Rose's face. "Thomas Bradford," she said quietly. Eleanor's surprise must have shown on her face because Rose continued. "Small town, news travels fast. Especially when someone like Thomas suddenly announces he's getting married to an Eastern lady." "You know him?" Eleanor asked. Rose and Yates exchanged a glance. "Everyone knows everyone around here," Rose said diplomatically. "Thomas keeps to himself mostly, but—" She trailed off. "But he has a reputation," Yates finished for her, sitting down at the table, "for stretching the truth and for being hard on those who work for him. I wish someone had stretched the truth to me before I traveled 2,000 miles, Eleanor said with unexpected bitterness. Rose reached across the table and patted her hand. "You're safe here, Eleanor, for as long as you need." The simple kindness brought fresh tears to Eleanor's eyes. She blinked them back, determined not to break down again. "Thank you, but I can only stay until the next train. I need to return east." "East to what?" Yates asked bluntly. Eleanor had no answer. Her parents were dead, her childhood home sold to pay debts. The teaching position she had reluctantly left was surely filled by now. There was nothing waiting for her in Boston except memories and perhaps a distant cousin who might take her in temporarily. "I don't know," she admitted finally, "but I can't stay here." "Why not?" Rose asked. "Wyoming might not be what you expected, but it has its own kind of beauty and opportunity." "For men, perhaps," Eleanor said, "but what future is there for a woman alone?" "I'm a woman alone," Rose pointed out. "Have been since my husband died 3 years ago. I help Yates run this ranch, and I do just fine." Eleanor looked at her with new respect. "I'm sorry about your husband." Rose nodded acknowledgement. "Life out here is hard, but it's honest, and there's freedom in that honesty." She ladled stew into bowls. "Eat now. Tomorrow's soon enough to make decisions." The meal was simple but delicious, and conversation flowed more easily as they ate. Rose asked about Boston, and Eleanor found herself describing the tree-lined streets, the harbor, and the changing seasons with unexpected nostalgia. Yates spoke little but listened intently, occasionally asking a thoughtful question that revealed a curiosity about the world beyond Wyoming. After supper, Rose showed Eleanor to a small but clean bedroom upstairs. "It's not fancy," she apologized, "but the sheets are fresh." "It's perfect," Eleanor assured her, "and far more than I expected from strangers." Rose smiled. "Out here, strangers are just friends you haven't had time to know yet." She pointed to a white pitcher and basin on a small table. "There's fresh water if you want to wash up. And I've left a nightgown on the bed. It might be a bit short, you're taller than me, but it's clean." Eleanor felt overwhelmed by the kindness. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," Rose said, patting her arm. "Get some rest. Things often look different in the morning light." Left alone, Eleanor changed into the borrowed nightgown and washed her face. The cool water refreshed her, washing away the dust of the road and some of the day's emotional turmoil. She brushed out her long auburn hair, wishing she had thought to pack her hairbrush in her hasty departure. Rose had provided a simple wooden comb that served well enough. The bed was narrow but comfortable, with a handmade quilt that enveloped her in unexpected softness. Eleanor lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of a horse, the soft hooting of an owl. So different from the city noises she had known all her life. What was she doing here in this stranger's home? What would tomorrow bring? The questions circled in her mind until exhaustion finally claimed her, and she drifted into a dreamless sleep. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through a window and the unfamiliar sounds of a rooster crowing. For a moment, she was disoriented, the simple room nothing like her bedroom in Boston or the cramped quarters above the general store. Then memory returned the discovery of Thomas's lies, her flight toward the depot, the kind cowboy who had offered sanctuary. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, grateful that her traveling suit of navy blue wool showed little evidence of her journey. After splashing water on her face and pinning her hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, Eleanor made her way downstairs. The main room was empty, but the smell of coffee and bacon guided her to the kitchen at the back of the house. Rose stood at the stove, humming softly as she flipped pancakes in a cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," Eleanor said hesitantly. Rose turned with a smile. "Good morning. I was beginning to think you might sleep the day away, not that I'd blame you after your ordeal." "What time is it?" Eleanor asked, embarrassed. "Nearly 8, Rose replied. "Early for city folk, I expect, but we've been up since dawn." She gestured to a chair at the kitchen table. "Sit." "Coffee's hot." Eleanor sat gratefully, accepting the mug Rose offered. The coffee was strong and black, not the milder brew she was accustomed to, but it was reviving. "Is Mr. Donovan about?" "Yates is checking on a pregnant mare," Rose explained, setting a plate of pancakes and bacon before Eleanor. "He'll be in shortly. Man's got a sixth sense about when food's ready." As if summoned by her words, the back door opened and Yates entered. He looked different in the daylight, younger somehow, despite the lines etched around his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun. His hair was a rich brown, touched with gold where the sun had lightened it, and today's stubble was perhaps a shade darker than yesterday's. "Morning, ladies," he said, removing his hat. "Miss Mitchell, hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Eleanor replied, suddenly self-conscious. "And please call me Eleanor." Yates nodded, washing his hands at the sink before joining them at the table. "Eleanor, then." He accepted a heaping plate from his sister with a grateful nod. "Rose said you're planning to take the afternoon train." "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, though with less certainty than she had felt the night before. "I should return east." "To what?" Rose asked, echoing her brother's question from dinner. Eleanor sighed. "I don't know exactly, but I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely." "It's not an imposition if we're offering," Rose said firmly, "and we need help around here. I've been after Yates to hire someone for months." Yates nodded as he chewed a bite of pancake. "Truth is, we're short-handed, lost 2 ranch hands to the silver mines last month. Better pay, less cow manure," he shrugged. "Can't blame them." "But I know nothing about ranch work," Eleanor protested. "Do you know how to read, write, keep accounts?" Rose asked. "Yes, of course, I was a school teacher in Boston." Yates and Rose exchanged a look. "A school teacher," Rose exclaimed. "That's perfect. The children around here have to ride 10 miles to the school in Willow Creek. Some families can't manage it, especially the younger ones." "Are you suggesting I teach here?" Eleanor asked, bewildered. "Why not?" Rose said. "We've got the old bunkhouse. It's not being used now with fewer hands. Could be fixed up as a small schoolhouse." I don't know," Eleanor stammered. The idea was both appealing and terrifying. "I'd need approval from the Territorial Education Authority, books, supplies." "Details," Rose said with a dismissive wave. "The important thing is, do you want to stay, even just for a while?" Eleanor looked from Rose's eager face to Yates's more measured expression. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Yates said quietly. "I know you're honest, I can see you're smart, and anyone who'd leave a comfortable life in Boston to start over in Wyoming has courage." He paused. "Those are rare qualities, Eleanor, worth investing in." Eleanor felt warmth spread through her at his words. No one had ever spoken of her with such simple, straightforward appreciation. Not her parents, who had valued her for her obedience and accomplishments. Not the school board in Boston, who had reluctantly hired her because male teachers were scarce after the war. Certainly not Thomas, who had viewed her as a convenient solution to his need for a respectable wife. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say you'll stay for a week," Rose suggested. "See if it suits you. If not, the train runs every day but Sunday, a week." It wasn't a lifetime commitment, just enough time to catch her breath and consider her options. Eleanor nodded slowly. "All right, 1 week." Rose beamed. "Wonderful. We'll ride into town this afternoon to get your things from Thomas." Eleanor's stomach clenched. I don't think you'll need your belongings, Yates interrupted gently, and it's best to face him directly, make a clean break. I'm afraid, Eleanor confessed in a small voice. We'll be with you, Rose assured her. Yates stood up. I need to finish with that mare, then I'll hitch up the wagon. He looked at Eleanor, his blue eyes serious. No one will force you to do anything you don't want to do, not while I'm around. After he left, Eleanor helped Rose clear the breakfast dishes. As they worked side by side, Rose told stories about growing up on the ranch, about her late husband Joel, who had been the town doctor before pneumonia took him, about the community of ranchers and farmers who had settled this valley over the past 20 years. It must seem primitive to you, Rose said as they dried the last plate. No theaters or museums or fancy shops. It's different, Eleanor acknowledged, but there's a realness to it that's appealing. She glanced out the window at the wide open landscape. In Boston, everything feels confined. Buildings so close together you can barely see the sky, people living on top of one another but barely speaking. Rose nodded. Out here we need each other, makes for stronger bonds, I think. By mid-morning, the wagon was ready. Eleanor changed into her second-best dress, a practical brown wool with minimal trim, and joined the Donovans outside. The wagon was simple but sturdy, with a fresh layer of straw in the back for comfort. Yates helped both women up to the bench seat, then climbed up himself and took the reins. Ready? He asked Eleanor. She wasn't, not really, but she nodded anyway. As the wagon pulled away from the ranch, Eleanor felt a curious mix of dread and anticipation. She was returning to Willow Creek, but not as Thomas Bradford's bride-to-be. She was going as her own woman, making her own choices. The ride to town took just over an hour. Eleanor spent much of it listening to Rose point out landmarks and sharing stories about the families who lived in the scattered homesteads they passed. Yates contributed occasionally, his deep voice providing facts about the land, the cattle, and the changing seasons. As they approached Willow Creek, Eleanor's anxiety returned. The town was small, just one main street with various businesses lining both sides, a church at one end and the train depot at the other. Thomas's hardware store was near the center, its freshly painted sign a stark contrast to the weathered facades of neighboring buildings. Yates pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the small hotel. Might be best if Rose goes with you to collect your things, he suggested. I'll wait here. Eleanor nodded gratefully. The prospect of facing Thomas with Yates present was unsettling, not because she feared for her safety, but because she feared the tension between the two men might escalate into something unpleasant. Rose squeezed her hand. It'll be all right, we'll be quick about it. As they crossed the street toward the hardware store, Eleanor noticed several curious glances from townsfolk. News of her arrival had clearly spread, and her abrupt departure from Thomas's would surely fuel gossip for weeks to come. The bell above the door jingled as they entered the store. Thomas was behind the counter arranging a display of nails. He looked up, his expression changing from shopkeeper's welcome to cold anger when he recognized Eleanor. So you've come back, he said flatly. Realized you have nowhere else to go, I suppose. Eleanor lifted her chin. I've come for my trunks, Mr. Bradford, nothing more. Thomas's gaze shifted to Rose. Mrs. Donovan, I might have guessed you'd be involved in this. Eleanor is staying with us for a time, Rose said pleasantly. We've just come to collect her belongings. Thomas's jaw tightened. I paid good money to bring her out here. Train ticket, correspondence fees, which I will repay as soon as I'm able, Eleanor interrupted. But our arrangement is at an end. Because I'm not rich enough for you, Thomas sneered. Not fancy enough for a Boston lady. Because you lied, Eleanor said simply, about everything that matters. Thomas's face flushed. I described things as they could be, not as they are, with a proper wife to help me build a proper wife, Rose interjected, her voice sharp, or a proper servant. Because from what I heard, you promised Eleanor a very different life than the one you planned to give her. Thomas glared at her. This isn't your concern, Rose. I'm making it my concern, Rose replied coolly. Now, where are Eleanor's trunks? For a moment, Eleanor thought Thomas might refuse. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. Upstairs, I'll get them. While he was gone, Rose whispered, You're doing wonderfully, stand your ground. Thomas returned with Eleanor's 2 trunks, setting them down with unnecessary force. There, take them and go. Eleanor approached the counter. Thank you, and I am sorry things didn't work out, Mr. Bradford. I wish you well. Thomas stared at her, his expression unreadable, then he turned away without another word. Outside, Yates was waiting with the wagon. He loaded the trunks without comment, his strong arms making light work of the heavy luggage. As they pulled away from the store, Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had faced Thomas and stood her ground. Whatever came next, she had taken back control of her own story. The return journey to the Donovan ranch was quieter, each person lost in their own thoughts. As they crested the final ridge, Eleanor looked down at the modest ranch with new eyes. Yesterday, it had been a temporary refuge. Today, it represented possibility, a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. Welcome back, Yates said softly, as if reading her thoughts. Eleanor smiled at him. Thank you for everything. His answering smile was brief but genuine, warming his eyes and softening the lines of his face. You're welcome, Eleanor. I'm glad you decided to stay, even if it's just for a week. In that moment, with the Wyoming sun warming her face and the vast landscape stretching out before her, Eleanor wondered if a week would be enough. Part of her, a growing part, wanted to discover what life might hold for her in this wild, honest place, and perhaps what might develop between herself and the quiet, thoughtful cowboy who had found her crying on the road to the depot and offered her a choice. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect late May day in Wyoming territory. Eleanor woke early, surprised at how quickly her body was adjusting to the ranch's rhythms. She dressed in her plainest dress, a sensible gray cotton that wouldn't show dirt easily, and made her way downstairs. Rose was already in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread. Good morning, sleep well. Very well, Eleanor replied, joining her at the table. May I help? Rose pushed a bowl of dough toward her. If you don't mind getting your hands floury. Been a while since I had another woman to share the work with. As they shaped the dough into loaves, Rose outlined the day's plan. Yates is going to show you around the ranch this morning. Then this afternoon, we thought we might visit the Parkers. They have 3 children who haven't been to school in months, not since winter made the road to town impassable. If you're serious about teaching, they'd be your first pupils. Eleanor felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. I'd like that. But I'll need to send for my teaching materials from Boston. Already taken care of, Rose said with a smile. Yates sent a telegram yesterday after we got back from town. Your former headmaster will ship your books and supplies next week. Eleanor was touched by the thoughtfulness. You're both so kind to a complete stranger, Rose shrugged. Not a stranger anymore. Besides, this valley needs a teacher desperately. The children are growing up wild as weeds. After breakfast, Yates took Eleanor on a tour of the ranch. They started with the barn where Penny and 5 other horses were stabled. This is Duke, Yates said, stroking the nose of a large black gelding. He's mine, stubborn as they come but loyal. Like his owner? Eleanor asked lightly. Yates looked at her in surprise, then chuckled. Rose would say so. He moved to another stall where a beautiful Palomino mare stood watching them. This is Sunny, gentlest horse we have. She'd be good for you to learn on if you've a mind to. Learn to ride, Eleanor had never considered it. Ladies in Boston occasionally rode in the park, side saddle in elaborate riding habits, but that was for show more than practical transportation. Can't get far in Wyoming without a horse, Yates pointed out. Unless you plan to walk everywhere or make me your personal driver. The idea of Yates as her driver made Eleanor smile. I suppose I should learn then. They continued to the corral where several cows with young calves grazed peacefully. These are our milk cows, Yates explained. The main herd, about 200 head, is out on the range with my ranch hands. Just 200? Eleanor asked, remembering Thomas's boasts of thousands of cattle. It's enough, Yates said without defensiveness. The Rocking D isn't the biggest spread in the territory, but it's ours free and clear. No bank loans, no mortgages. My father believed in living within your means. Eleanor appreciated his honesty. It's a beautiful place. Your father chose well. He did. Yates leaned against the corral fence, looking out over his land. Came out here in '58 with nothing but a wagon, some tools, and big dreams. Built everything you see, Met my mother at a church social in Cheyenne. She was a school teacher like you. Really? Eleanor was intrigued by this connection. Where is she now? Died when Rose was 12. Fever took her and our baby brother. His voice was matter of fact, but Eleanor sensed the old grief beneath the words. Pa followed her 5 years ago. Hart gave out while he was mending fence on the north boundary, found him with his tools still in his hands. I'm sorry, Eleanor said softly. Yates nodded acknowledgement. Life out here is hard, but it's honest. Pa used to say that. Eleanor smiled at the echo of Rose's words from her first night at the ranch. Your sister said the same thing. Rose is like Pa sees the bright side of everything. He straightened up. Come on, I'll show you where the bunkhouse is. The one we thought might make a good schoolhouse. They walked to a small building about 100 yards from the main house. It was a simple structure with a porch across the front and several windows. Inside was one large room with a stone fireplace at one end and rough plank floors. It's not fancy, Yates said, but it's solid. Could put in some benches, a desk for you, maybe a blackboard, he gestured to the fireplace. Gets cold early out here, you'd need a good fire come September. Eleanor walked around the space, already envisioning how it might look with children seated at desks, books open before them. It's perfect, she said. Truly. Yates looked pleased. Really, you're not just being polite. No, I mean it. In Boston, I taught in a grand brick building with ornate woodwork and large windows. But the classrooms were crowded, the air stale. This, she gestured around the simple room, has light and air and possibility. Something in Yates's expression softened. You surprise me, Eleanor Mitchell. Do I? How so? Most city ladies who come west see only what's lacking. You see what could be. The simple observation warmed her. Perhaps I'm changing already. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Eleanor felt a connection that went beyond mere acquaintance. Then Yates cleared his throat and looked away. We should head back. Rose will have lunch ready soon, and we need to leave for the Parkers by 1 o'clock if we want to be home before dark. As they walked back to the house, Eleanor found herself studying Yates more carefully. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. Not handsome in the conventional sense, perhaps, but there was something compelling about his weathered face and direct gaze. He was nothing like the refined gentlemen she had known in Boston, with their polished manners and carefully trimmed beards. Yates Donovan was as unvarnished as the land he worked, and oddly, she found that refreshing. After a simple lunch of cold ham, bread, and apple preserves, Rose helped Eleanor change into a more suitable outfit for visiting neighbors, a blue cotton dress with white piping that Rose pronounced just right, not too fancy but respectful. They took the wagon again, with Eleanor seated between the Donovan siblings. The Parker homestead was about 5 miles away in a small valley protected by limestone bluffs. The Parkers came out about 10 years ago, Rose explained as they traveled. Martin served in the war Union side and came west to escape the memories. His wife Sarah is sweet but frail. The children are good kids, if a bit wild. The Parker home was smaller than the Donovan ranch house, just 1 story with a lean-to addition at the back. A man was working in a vegetable garden as they approached, and he straightened up, shading his eyes against the sun to identify the visitors. That's Martin, Yates said, raising his hand in greeting. Martin Parker returned the wave and called toward the house. Moments later, a slender woman and 3 children emerged onto the porch. The oldest is Joshua, he's 11, Rose whispered to Eleanor. Then Abigail, who's 9, and little David, who's 6. Yates pulled the wagon to a stop, and Martin Parker approached with a welcoming smile. Yates, Rose. Good to see you. What brings you out our way? Brought someone you should meet, Yates said, helping Eleanor down from the wagon. This is Miss Eleanor Mitchell. She's going to be teaching school at our place. Martin's eyes widened with surprise and delight. A teacher right here in the valley. He turned toward his family. Sarah, children, come meet Miss Mitchell. The Parker family gathered around, the children eyeing Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. Sarah Parker, pale and thin but with a lovely smile, extended her hand. Miss Mitchell, this is wonderful news. We've been so worried about the children's education. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Parker, Eleanor replied. I understand your children haven't been to school in some months, not since before Christmas, Sarah confirmed. The road to town gets treacherous in winter, and I'm afraid I don't have the education myself to teach them properly. Well, I hope to remedy that, Eleanor said, then knelt down to address the children directly. I'm very pleased to meet you all. I was a teacher in Boston before I came west. Boston, Joshua repeated, impressed. That's way far east, isn't it? Yes, on the Atlantic Ocean, Eleanor confirmed. Have you seen whales? Abigail asked eagerly. Eleanor smiled. I have, from ships in the harbor. They're magnificent creatures. Little David, who had been hiding behind his mother, peeked out. Do you know lots of stories? I know hundreds, Eleanor assured him, and I'll share them all if you come to school. David's eyes widened. Every day. Well, perhaps not every story every day, Eleanor laughed. But yes, stories are an important part of learning. Sarah Parker invited them all inside for coffee and conversation. The small home was meticulously clean but sparsely furnished. Eleanor noticed several books on a shelf, a Bible, an almanac, and a few well-worn volumes of poetry. As the adults discussed the logistics of the new school arrangement, when it would start, how often classes would meet, what supplies the children would need, Eleanor observed the Parker children. Joshua was serious and attentive, clearly eager for education. Abigail was bright-eyed and curious, asking thoughtful questions. David was more hesitant but warmed up when Eleanor asked about his pet toad, which he proudly showed her in a box on the porch. By the time they left, arrangements had been made for the Parker children to begin lessons the following Monday. Martin would spread the word to other families in the area, and Rose promised to help Eleanor prepare the schoolhouse over the next few days. That went well, Rose said as they headed back to the ranch. The Parkers are good people. Their children will be a fine start to your school. They seem eager to learn, Eleanor agreed. Especially Joshua. He reminds me of some of my students in Boston, so serious about his responsibilities. He's had to be, Yates said. Martin's back was injured in the war. Some days he can barely get out of bed. Joshua does a man's work most days. Eleanor felt a pang of sympathy for the boy. All the more reason he deserves an education, to have options for his future. Yates glanced at her. That's why we need you here, Eleanor. These children deserve the same chances as city kids. The simple statement touched her deeply. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Eleanor felt truly needed, not as a potential wife or housekeeper, but for her own skills and knowledge. It was a heady feeling. As they crested the ridge that overlooked the Donovan ranch, the setting sun bathed the buildings in golden light. Eleanor felt a curious sense of homecoming, as if she had known this place far longer than a mere 2 days. Beautiful, isn't it? Yates said quietly. Yes, Eleanor agreed. It really is. Their eyes met briefly, and again Eleanor felt that connection, a silent understanding that needed no words. In that moment, she knew her decision to stay even temporarily had been the right one. Whatever came next, she was exactly where she needed to be. The next 5 days passed in a flurry of activity as Eleanor prepared for her new role as teacher. Rose helped her clean and organize the bunkhouse, while Yates and his ranch hands moved in simple benches and tables that would serve as desks. One of the hands, a skilled carpenter named Miguel, crafted a blackboard from a smooth plank painted with a special mixture ordered from the general store in Willow Creek. Word spread quickly through the valley about the new school. By Sunday afternoon, Eleanor had met with 8 families representing 16 children ranging in age from 6 to 14. The prospect of teaching such a diverse group was daunting but exciting. Each child brought different needs and abilities, and Eleanor was determined to serve them all well. Rose had insisted that Eleanor use Sunday as a day of rest and reflection before school began. After a simple midday meal, the household dispersed for their afternoon activities. Rose to visit a neighbor who was ill, and Yates to check on the cattle with his hands. Eleanor found herself alone for the first time since arriving at the ranch. She decided to explore a bit further than she had yet ventured. Changing into a simple skirt and shirtwaist, she set out toward a small hill that overlooked the property. The climb was steeper than it appeared, and Eleanor was breathing hard by the time she reached the summit. But the view was worth the effort. From this vantage point, she could see not only the Donovan ranch but much of the surrounding valley. The landscape was so different from the crowded streets of Boston, vast and open, with colors that shifted constantly as clouds passed overhead. In the distance, mountains rose blue against the horizon, their peaks still capped with snow despite the late spring warmth. Eleanor sat on a sun-warmed rock, marveling at the beauty around her. How strange that she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man she had never met, only to find herself in this unexpected place, embarking on an entirely different life than the one she had planned. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted her thoughts. Looking down, she saw Yates approaching on Duke. He spotted her and redirected his path up the hill, dismounting when the terrain grew too steep for riding. "Thought I might find you up here," he called as he climbed the last few yards, leading Duke by the reins. "Rose said you'd gone walking." "It's beautiful," Eleanor said as he reached her. "I needed to catch my breath before tomorrow." Yates nodded, understanding, nervous about the school. "A little," she admitted. "It's different from teaching in Boston. There, everything was structured with strict curricula and regular inspections. Here, I'm creating something from nothing." "That's how everything begins out here," Yates said, settling on a rock near hers. "Every ranch, every farm, every town all started with someone looking at empty land and seeing possibility." He glanced at her. "You'll do fine, Eleanor. Those kids are lucky to have you." His confidence warmed her. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." Yates looked surprised. "From me, why's that?" Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "Because you don't give praise lightly. I've noticed that about you. When you say something, you mean it." A faint smile touched his lips. "Not much use for empty words out here." "No, I suppose not." Eleanor looked out over the valley again. "Everything is so honest here, the land, the people, the work. It's refreshing after Boston society." "Boston wasn't honest." "Not in the same way," Eleanor explained. "There, everything is veiled in politeness and propriety. People rarely say what they mean or mean what they say. It's all a complex dance of manners and expectations." "Sounds exhausting," Yates observed. Eleanor laughed. "It is. I never realized how exhausting until I came here." She sighed. "Though I miss some things, books, music, theater." "We have books," Yates pointed out, "and music. Pedro, one of my hands, plays the guitar beautifully. As for theater," he shrugged. "Well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad." His attempt at humor delighted her. "No, it's not bad at all." They fell into comfortable silence, watching as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Duke grazed contentedly nearby, occasionally swishing his tail at flies. "Your week is almost up," Yates said finally, his voice casual but his eyes watchful. "Still planning to take the train east?" The question caught Eleanor off guard, though she had been thinking about it herself. I'm not sure anymore," she admitted. "The school needs me, at least for a while." "Just the school?" Yates asked quietly. The directness of his question made her heart skip. "What do you mean?" Yates turned to face her fully. "I'm asking if there might be other reasons for you to stay, people maybe who'd miss you if you left." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Are you saying you'd miss me, Mr. Donovan?" "I'm saying I've grown accustomed to having you around," he replied, his blue eyes steady on hers. "And that I'd like to see where this might lead given time." Eleanor was both thrilled and frightened by his candor. In Boston, courtship proceeded along well-established lines: formal calls, chaperoned outings, careful conversations that never touched on genuine feelings until a proposal was imminent. This straightforward acknowledgement of attraction was entirely new territory. "I'd like that too," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "To see where this might lead." Yates's expression softened with relief and something else, a warmth that made Eleanor's pulse quicken. For a moment she thought he might reach for her hand or perhaps even kiss her. Instead, he stood and offered his hand to help her up. "We should head back. Sun's getting low and Rose will have supper ready soon." Eleanor placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palm, evidence of years of hard work. As he helped her to her feet, she found herself standing very close to him, close enough to see the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes and the way the setting sun brought out gold highlights in his brown hair. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the assistance, but for everything, for finding her on the road that day, for offering her a choice, for seeing value in her that Thomas Bradford had never recognized." "You're welcome, Eleanor," he replied, his voice equally soft. They walked down the hill side by side, Duke following behind. Their hands didn't touch, but Eleanor felt a connection between them that needed no physical contact to affirm. Something had shifted between them on that hilltop, an acknowledgement of possibilities, of futures not yet written but full of promise. As they approached the ranch house, warm light spilling from its windows into the gathering dusk, Eleanor felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Her journey west had not led where she expected, but perhaps it had led exactly where she needed to be. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Eleanor woke before sunrise, too nervous and excited to sleep. She dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a navy blue skirt and white shirtwaist with a cameo brooch at the collar. After pinning her hair into a neat chignon, she went downstairs to find Rose already preparing a special breakfast. "Thought you'd need a hearty meal before facing those children," Rose said, setting a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before her. "Teaching is hungry work." "I'm not sure I can eat," Eleanor confessed. "My stomach is in knots." "Just a few bites," Rose urged. "You'll need your strength." Yates joined them moments later, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt. "Big day," he observed, accepting a cup of coffee from his sister. "Anything I can do to help?" "Just having your support means everything," Eleanor said. "Both of you have been so wonderful." After breakfast, Eleanor gathered her teaching materials, the books she had brought from Boston, slates and chalk purchased from the general store in Willow Creek, and a curriculum plan she had worked on late into the night. Yates carried everything to the schoolhouse for her, arranging it on the small desk Miguel had crafted. "Looks official," he said, stepping back to survey the room. Sunlight streamed through the clean windows, illuminating the simple space that now contained 3 rows of bench desks, the teacher's desk at the front and the blackboard mounted on the wall. "It's perfect," Eleanor said sincerely. "Thank you for making this possible." Yates shrugged, but she could tell he was pleased. "Just providing the space, you're the one doing the real work." He checked his pocket watch. "First students should be arriving in about half an hour. I'll leave you to get settled." Left alone, Eleanor arranged her materials and wrote a welcome message on the blackboard. As she worked, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. The disappointment and fear she had felt on the road to the depot seemed distant now, replaced by purpose and growing confidence. The sound of horses and wagons announced the arrival of her students. Eleanor straightened her skirt, took a deep breath, and went to the door to greet them. The Parker children arrived first, followed quickly by the Hendersons with their 4 children, the Wilsons with 3, and others in rapid succession. By 9 o'clock, 15 children were seated at the benches, watching Eleanor with expressions ranging from excitement to trepidation. "Good morning," Eleanor began, her teacher's voice coming back to her naturally. "I'm Miss Mitchell, and I'm very pleased to be your teacher. We're going to learn many wonderful things together in this schoolhouse." She proceeded to explain her expectations and the daily schedule, then asked each child to introduce themselves and share one thing they hoped to learn. Their answers ranged from practical, "I want to cipher better so I can help Pa with the accounts," to ambitious, "I want to learn about the whole world." The morning passed in a blur of assessments and basic lessons. Eleanor quickly discovered that while some of the children had received consistent education before the winter interrupted their schooling, others had significant gaps in their learning. Joshua Parker could read quite well, but struggled with mathematics. Abigail Henderson showed a remarkable aptitude for geography, but needed help with spelling. The youngest children required the most basic instruction in letters and numbers. By noon, when the children broke for lunch, Eleanor was exhausted but exhilarated. Teaching these eager, honest children was so different from her experience in Boston, where many students attended school only because the law required it. Here, education was valued as the precious opportunity it was. Rose appeared at the schoolhouse door with a basket. "Thought you might need some refreshment," she said, unpacking sandwiches and a jar of lemonade. "How's it going?" "Wonderfully," Eleanor replied with genuine enthusiasm. "They're bright and eager to learn. Some need more help than others, but all of them want to be here." "That's the frontier spirit," Rose said proudly. These children understand the value of knowledge because they see how hard their parents work for everything they have. The afternoon session focused on reading and history. Eleanor read aloud from a book of American folk tales, captivating even the most restless children with stories of Paul Bunyan and John Henry. When 3 o'clock came, she was surprised at how quickly the day had passed. As the children gathered their things to leave, little David Parker approached her desk. "Miss Mitchell," he said solemnly, "are you going to be our teacher forever and ever?" The innocent question caught Eleanor off guard. I hope to be your teacher for a good long while, David." The boy nodded, satisfied. "Good, because you tell the best stories." His simple approval touched her deeply. As the last wagon pulled away, Eleanor sat at her desk, reflecting on the day. She had come west seeking a new beginning, never imagining it would take this form. Yet teaching in this simple one-room schoolhouse felt more meaningful than all her years in the grand Boston school. She was gathering her materials when Yates appeared in the doorway. "How was your first day, Miss Mitchell?" he asked, his eyes warm with interest. "Exhausting, challenging." "Wonderful," Eleanor replied honestly. "These children are remarkable, Yates, so eager to learn, so appreciative of every book, every story." "Like their teacher," he observed, stepping into the room. "You're glowing, Eleanor. Teaching suits you." She felt herself blush at the compliment. "Thank you. I think I've found my place here. Does that mean you're staying?" There was a careful neutrality in his voice, but his eyes betrayed his hope. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I'm staying, at least for now." The smile that transformed his face made her heart skip. "Good," he said simply. "The valley needs you." He paused before adding quietly, "and not just the valley." Before Eleanor could respond, Rose called from outside, "Are you two coming to supper, or should I feed it all to the chickens?" Yates rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "My sister, always interrupting at the wrong moment." He offered Eleanor his arm. "Shall we?" As they walked back to the house together, Eleanor felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. She had come west seeking security through marriage, but had found something far more valuable: independence, purpose, and the beginnings of something that felt remarkably like love. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Each weekday, Eleanor taught her growing class of students, 22 by the end of June, as word spread through the valley about the quality of education available at the Donovan Ranch. Evenings were spent preparing lessons, grading assignments, and enjoying the company of Rose and Yates. Weekends brought community gatherings, visits to students' homes, and quiet moments of personal reflection. Eleanor's relationship with Yates developed slowly but steadily. There were no dramatic declarations or passionate embraces, just a deepening connection built on shared conversations, mutual respect, and occasional moments of surprising tenderness. A brush of hands while passing the bread at dinner. A private smile across a crowded church social. The way he always seemed to know when she needed quiet encouragement before facing a challenging day. By mid-July, Eleanor had fully settled into life at the Donovan Ranch. She had her own routines, her own spaces, not just the schoolhouse, but a small corner of the garden where Rose had encouraged her to plant flowers, and a comfortable rocking chair on the porch that had somehow become Eleanor's chair, without anyone explicitly designating it as such. One particularly warm Saturday, Rose announced that she was going into Willow Creek for supplies and to visit her friend Martha, who was expecting a baby. "I'll be gone overnight," she told Eleanor as they cleared away breakfast dishes. "Martha's husband is away delivering cattle to Cheyenne, and she shouldn't be alone so close to her time." "Of course you should stay with her," Eleanor agreed. "Is there anything I can do to help while you're gone?" "Just keep an eye on my brother," Rose said with a teasing smile. "Make sure he doesn't work himself to exhaustion. Man forgets to eat when I'm not here to remind him." After Rose left, Eleanor spent the morning working on lesson plans for the coming week. Around midday, she realized she hadn't seen Yates since breakfast. Concerned that Rose's prediction might be accurate, she prepared a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and cold ham, then set out to find him. One of the ranch hands directed her to the east pasture, where Yates was mending fence. She found him hammering a new post into place, his shirt darkened with sweat in the summer heat. I thought you might be hungry, Eleanor called as she approached, carrying a basket containing the food and a jug of cold water. Yates looked up in surprise, then smiled. You're a welcome sight, Eleanor. I was just thinking about heading back for something to eat. Liar, she teased. Rose warned me you'd work straight through without her to remind you about meals, he laughed, setting down his hammer. My sister knows me too well. He gestured to a nearby oak tree. Shall we eat in the shade? They settled under the spreading branches, grateful for the cooler air. Eleanor unpacked the food while Yates washed his hands with water from the jug. How's the fence coming along? She asked as they ate. Slow work, but necessary, he replied. Cattle are clever about finding weak spots. Turn your back for a minute and they're 3 miles down the road. Rather like children, Eleanor observed with a smile, always testing boundaries. Yates chuckled. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. He studied her for a moment. You're good with them, you know, the children, they respect you. I hope so, Eleanor said. I want to give them tools to build their futures, whatever those might be. You're changing lives, Yates said seriously. Including mine. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. How have I changed your life? Yates set down his bread, considering his words carefully. Before you came, I was content enough. The ranch was doing well. Rose and I had our routines. But there was something missing. He met her eyes directly. You brought light, Eleanor, and possibilities I hadn't let myself consider for a long time. Eleanor's heart quickened. What kind of possibilities? Instead of answering directly, Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks now, waiting for the right moment. He opened his palm to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. It was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they decided to build a life together. Eleanor stared at the ring, then at Yates's face. Are you proposing? Not very elegantly, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. But yes. Eleanor Mitchell, I know you came west expecting one life and found another. I know you've only been here a short time, but I love you. I love your courage, your kindness, your intelligence. I love the way you see beauty in this harsh land, the way you've embraced our community. He took a deep breath. I'm asking if you might consider building a future here, with me. Eleanor felt tears well in her eyes. This was nothing like the arrangement she had made with Thomas Bradford, a cold agreement between strangers. This was a proposal born of genuine affection, respect, and shared experiences. Yates, she began, her voice trembling slightly, when you found me on the road that day, I was running away from a mistake. I was broken and afraid. She reached out to touch his weathered cheek. You offered me a choice then. You're offering me another choice now. And, his voice was steady, but she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. And I choose you, Eleanor said simply. I love you, Yates Donovan. I would be honored to be your wife. The smile that transformed his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He took her hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. It's beautiful, Eleanor whispered, admiring the way the pearl caught the dappled light filtering through the oak leaves. Not as beautiful as you, Yates replied, then laughed self-consciously. Listen to me, I'm turning into a poet. I like it, Eleanor assured him. She leaned forward hesitantly, and Yates met her halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, a tender promise of all that was to come. When they parted, Eleanor felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world, as if pieces that had been floating separately had finally found their proper alignment. Rose will be pleased, Yates said after a moment. She's been dropping hints for weeks. Eleanor laughed. I noticed. She's not exactly subtle. No, subtlety isn't my sister's strong suit. He took Eleanor's hand, running his thumb over the ring. When would you like to be married? I don't want to rush you, Eleanor considered. Not too long, but perhaps we should wait until after harvest. That would give us time to prepare, and it wouldn't interfere with the busiest time at the ranch. Yates nodded. October then, the aspens will be golden by then. It's the prettiest time in the valley. October sounds perfect, Eleanor agreed. She looked around at the peaceful pasture, the distant mountains, and the man beside her, this thoughtful cowboy who had changed the course of her life with a simple question on a dusty road. I never imagined I could be this happy, Yates. Never, me neither, he admitted. After my parents died, I thought my life was set just the ranch, the work, taking care of Rose. Then you came along with your Boston education and your fancy ways." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Turned everything upside down. For the better, I hope," Eleanor said. "For the better," he confirmed, squeezing her hand. "Definitely for the better." They finished their lunch in comfortable conversation, making plans for their shared future. The schoolhouse would remain where it was, with Eleanor continuing to teach. They would live in the main house, with Rose having her own suite of rooms for privacy. Perhaps, in time, there would be Donovan children, who would grow up knowing both the value of education and the satisfaction of honest work. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Eleanor felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her journey west had been filled with disappointment and tears, but those very trials had led her to this place, this man, this life. She had cried on her way to the depot, but Yates had found her and offered her a choice. And in choosing to stay, she had found not just a home, but a love deeper and truer than anything she had dared to dream. News of Eleanor and Yates's engagement spread quickly through the valley. Rose, as predicted, was ecstatic when she returned from town to find them sitting together on the porch, Eleanor's ringed hand clasped in Yates's. "Finally," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around them both. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the barn together to make something happen." The community embraced the announcement with equal enthusiasm. The Parkers, the Hendersons, and other families whose children attended Eleanor's school offered congratulations and practical gifts: hand-stitched linens, preserved fruits, and promises of help with wedding preparations. Even Thomas Bradford, when encountered in town during a supply run, gave a stiff nod of acknowledgement. "Donovan's a good man," he said grudgingly to Eleanor. "Better suited to you than I would have been." Eleanor could afford to be gracious. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford, I wish you well." September brought the harvest, and Eleanor got her first real taste of the all-consuming work that defined life on a cattle ranch. Though she continued teaching, she also joined in the communal efforts, helping Rose prepare meals for the ranch hands, learning to preserve vegetables from the garden for winter, and even assisting with some of the lighter ranch tasks when school was not in session. Yates worked from dawn until well after dark most days, coming in for meals with exhaustion etched on his face, but always finding a smile for Eleanor. She learned to have hot water ready for him to wash away the day's dirt, to massage his shoulders when they grew stiff from hours in the saddle, and to listen with genuine interest to the day's triumphs and challenges. By early October, the harvest was complete, the cattle sorted for market, and preparations for winter well underway. With these essential tasks addressed, attention turned to the upcoming wedding. "Nothing fancy," Eleanor insisted when Rose suggested ordering a white satin gown from Denver. "Something simple and practical." She had learned that on the frontier, practicality was not just a virtue but a necessity. In the end, she chose to be married in a dress of soft blue wool, trimmed with cream-colored lace that Rose had saved from their mother's wedding gown. Yates would wear his best suit, a dark gray ensemble reserved for church and rare trips to Cheyenne. The ceremony would take place at the small church in Willow Creek, followed by a celebration at the ranch. Every family in the valley was invited, along with Yates's business associates from surrounding communities and a few friends from Eleanor's brief time in town. The day before the wedding, Eleanor was putting final touches on her dress when a knock came at her bedroom door. "Come in," she called, expecting Rose. Instead, Yates entered, carrying a small wooden box. "I know it's supposed to be bad luck to see the bride before the wedding," he said with a smile, "but I wanted to give you something privately." Eleanor set aside her sewing. "What is it?" Yates sat beside her on the bed and opened the box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "This was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her on their wedding day." He opened the locket to reveal tiny portraits, one of an older couple Eleanor recognized from photographs as Yates's parents, the other side empty. "I thought perhaps, after tomorrow, we might put our likeness in the empty space, continue the tradition." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "It's beautiful, Yates, thank you." She turned so he could fasten it around her neck, the weight of it settling against her collarbone like a promise. "There's something else," Yates said, suddenly looking nervous. "I've been saving it as a surprise." He took her hand. "Come with me." Curious, Eleanor followed him downstairs and out the front door. Instead of heading toward the barn or corrals, he led her along a path that wound around the side of the house to an area Eleanor had seldom visited, a small clearing surrounded by aspen trees, now resplendent in their autumn gold. In the center of the clearing stood a new structure, a small cabin built of fresh-cut logs with a stone chimney and wide front porch. "Yates," Eleanor breathed. "What is this?" "Our home," he said simply. "If you want it." Eleanor stared at him. "But I thought we would live in the main house with Rose." "We can," Yates assured her, "if that's what you prefer, but I thought you might like a place that's just ours, somewhere to start our life together." He squeezed her hand. "Rose helped plan it, said every bride deserves her own hearth." Eleanor approached the cabin slowly, taking in the careful craftsmanship. The windows were large, designed to let in maximum light. The porch had a swing hanging from sturdy chains. The door was painted a cheerful red. "When did you do this?" she asked, amazed. "You've been working day and night with the harvest, evenings, early mornings, whenever I could spare an hour," Yates admitted. "The hands helped too. Miguel did most of the fine work, the door frames, the cabinets inside." "Inside," Eleanor repeated. "It's finished inside too." Yates nodded, producing a key from his pocket. "Would you like to see?" The interior of the cabin was simple but beautiful. The main room served as both parlor and kitchen, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, and a comfortable sofa. A doorway led to a bedroom containing a large bed with a colorful quilt Eleanor recognized as Rose's handiwork. Built-in shelves held some of Eleanor's books, already moved from her room in the main house. "There's space for a nursery," Yates said quietly, pointing to another door. "When the time comes." Eleanor turned to him, overwhelmed. "You did all this for me, for us," he corrected gently. "I wanted to give you a home that's truly yours, not Thomas Bradford's false promises, not my parents' house, but something new that we build together." Eleanor wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "I love it," she whispered. "And I love you, Yates Donovan." "I love you too, Eleanor Mitchell," he replied, holding her close. "Soon to be Eleanor Donovan." Eleanor Mitchell became Eleanor Donovan on a perfect October day, with golden aspen leaves drifting like blessings around the small church in Willow Creek. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with Rose serving as Eleanor's attendant and Miguel standing up for Yates. The church was filled to capacity with friends, neighbors, and students, all there to witness the union of two people who had found each other against considerable odds. Reverend Thompson, the circuit preacher who served communities throughout the territory, spoke eloquently about love, commitment, and building a life together on foundations of mutual respect and shared purpose. When it came time for the vows, Eleanor's voice was clear and confident, and Yates's deep tones carried to the farthest corner of the church. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration that followed at the Donovan Ranch lasted well into the evening. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family in the valley: roasted beef and venison, fresh bread, pies of every description, and a 3-tiered wedding cake that Rose had secretly ordered from Cheyenne. Children played games in the yard while adults danced to music provided by Pedro and his guitar, joined by 2 fiddlers from neighboring ranches. Eleanor danced with her husband, with Joshua Parker and other students, with Miguel and the ranch hands. Every moment felt precious, a memory to be treasured in the years to come. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch yard, Yates found Eleanor sitting on the porch, taking a moment's rest from the festivities. "Happy, Mrs. Donovan?" he asked, settling beside her. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "And you, same." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding band, a simple gold circle that matched his own. "I keep thinking about that day on the road, if I'd been just a few minutes later heading back to the ranch. Or if I had reached the depot before breaking down. Everything would be different," Yates finished for her. "Makes you believe in fate, doesn't it?" Eleanor considered this. Perhaps, or perhaps it simply shows that life's greatest blessings often come disguised as disappointments. Yates nodded, his expression thoughtful. Well, whatever brought you to that road, fate, Providence, or Thomas Bradford's lies, I'm grateful for it. As am I, Eleanor agreed softly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as lanterns were lit around the yard, transforming the gathering dusk into a magical landscape of golden light and moving shadows. From the barn came the sound of laughter and music, Pedro playing a romantic ballad while couples danced under the stars. Should we rejoin our guests? Eleanor asked eventually. Soon, Yates said, drawing her closer. I just wanted a moment alone with my wife before we're surrounded again. The word wife sent a pleasant shiver through Eleanor. Yesterday she had been Miss Mitchell, the school teacher. Today she was Mrs. Donovan, a rancher's wife. Yet she was still herself, still Eleanor, still a teacher, still the woman who had found courage to leave one life behind and embrace another. I'm glad we'll still be close to the schoolhouse, she said, following her thoughts. I want to continue teaching. I wouldn't have it any other way, Yates assured her. Your students need you, and selfishly I love seeing you in that schoolroom, sharing your knowledge, helping those children grow. Eleanor smiled at him, touched by his understanding. So many men would have expected their wives to set aside careers upon marriage, focusing solely on home and family. Yates saw her teaching not as competition for her attention, but as an essential part of who she was. We should go back, she said reluctantly. Rose will be looking for us. As if summoned by her name, Rose appeared at the edge of the porch. There you are. Everyone's asking for the bride and groom. The Hendersons are about to leave, and they want to say goodbye. Yates stood, offering his hand to Eleanor. Duty calls, Mrs. Donovan. Eleanor took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. Lead the way, Mr. Donovan. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of goodbyes, well wishes, and final dances. By the time the last guest departed, the moon was high in the sky, casting silver light over the now quiet ranch. Rose hugged them both before retiring to the main house. I've left food in your cabin, she told them, and the fire should still be warm, everything else. She smiled mischievously. Well, I'll see you both tomorrow, not too early. Left alone, Yates and Eleanor walked hand in hand to their new home. The cabin looked welcoming in the moonlight, with soft light glowing from the windows and smoke curling from the chimney. At the threshold, Yates paused. Tradition says I should carry you over. Eleanor laughed. You've built me a home, married me in front of our entire community, and promised to love me for a lifetime. I think we can dispense with one tradition. Absolutely not, Yates declared, sweeping her into his arms with surprising ease. I'm doing this properly, Eleanor Donovan. He carried her across the threshold into their new home, setting her down gently in the center of the main room. The fire crackled invitingly in the hearth, and someone rose, most likely had scattered wildflowers across the table and hung a garland of aspen leaves above the door. Welcome home, Yates said softly. Eleanor looked around at the cozy space, then back at the man who had created it for her, this honest, hard-working cowboy who had found her crying on her way to the depot, and offered her a choice that had changed everything. Home, she repeated, savoring the word. Yes, this is definitely home. And as Yates drew her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice, not just in marrying Yates, but in staying in this wild, beautiful place that had so unexpectedly captured her heart. Epilogue, Spring 1880. Eleanor stood on the porch of the cabin, watching as Yates demonstrated to 5-year-old Joshua Henderson how to gentle a young colt. The boy listened with rapt attention, his small face serious as he absorbed every word of instruction. In the corral nearby, other children from Eleanor's school took turns riding Sunny under Rose's watchful eye. It was a Saturday tradition that had developed over the past year, students coming to the ranch for riding lessons, animal care, and what Yates called practical education. While Eleanor taught reading, writing, mathematics, and history during the week, these weekend sessions provided skills equally valuable for life on the frontier. The school itself had grown beyond all expectations. What had begun with 22 students now included 35 children from throughout the valley and beyond. The Territorial Education Authority had officially recognized Eleanor's school last fall, providing a small stipend for supplies and books. The original bunkhouse classroom had been expanded, with a new wing added to accommodate the increasing enrollment. Eleanor's hand drifted to her abdomen, where the first subtle roundness was beginning to show beneath her dress. Their child, hers and Yates's, would arrive in late summer, a new life to join the community they had built together. Daydreaming again, Rose teased, coming up the porch steps. Her cheeks were flushed from the spring sunshine, her eyes bright with the joy she always found in working with the children. Just thinking how much has changed, Eleanor admitted. 2 years ago, I was in Boston, planning to marry a man I'd never met. Now look at me, a rancher's wife, a respected teacher, and soon to be a mother. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, Rose agreed, settling into one of the porch chairs. Especially out here, she smiled at her sister-in-law. I've never seen Yates so happy, you know, even before your news. Eleanor returned the smile. He deserves happiness, you both do, after all you've been through. Rose waved away the sentiment. We've had our share of hardship, but who hasn't? The important thing is finding joy where you can. She glanced toward the corral, where Yates was now lifting Joshua onto the colt's back. Speaking of joy, Martha Wilson told me Thomas Bradford's cousin is coming to visit next month, a widow from St. Louis, apparently quite handsome. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Rose Donovan, are you planning to court the poor woman before she even arrives? Not for me, Rose laughed. For Thomas, man needs someone to smooth his rough edges. Playing matchmaker now, Eleanor shook her head fondly. You're incorrigible, just practical, Rose countered. This valley needs good people to thrive, and despite his faults, Thomas is a decent man at heart, just lonely and set in his ways. Eleanor had to admit there was truth in Rose's assessment. In the months following her broken engagement, Thomas had gradually become, if not a friend, at least a cordial acquaintance. He supplied the school with paper and pencils at cost, and occasionally attended community events at the ranch. Well, I wish him well, whoever he ends up with, Eleanor said sincerely. Without his letters, false as they were, I wouldn't have come west, wouldn't have met Yates, she smiled. Wouldn't be standing here now, watching my husband teach Joshua Henderson to ride, see. Everything happens for a reason, Rose declared with satisfaction. Even Thomas Bradford's lies, Eleanor laughed. Perhaps you're right. The sound drew Yates's attention. He looked up, his eyes finding Eleanor's across the yard. Even after more than a year of marriage, that connection still sent a warm flutter through her heart. He said something to Joshua, then made his way toward the cabin, his long strides eating up the distance. How's my favorite teacher feeling? He asked as he climbed the porch steps. Wonderful, Eleanor assured him. The morning sickness has finally passed. Good. He placed a gentle hand on her still modest bump. And how's my son today, or daughter? Eleanor reminded him with a smile. Active, like someone else I know who can't sit still for more than 5 minutes. Yates grinned unrepentantly. Can't help it. Spring's the busiest time on a ranch. He glanced back at the children in the corral. They're doing well, aren't they? Joshua's a natural with horses. He is, Eleanor agreed. And Abigail Henderson shows real promise with her mathematics. I'm thinking of recommending her for further education when she's older, perhaps the normal school in Cheyenne. College for women, Yates mused. Times are changing. For the better, Rose interjected firmly. No argument here, Yates assured his sister. He turned back to Eleanor. I was thinking we might invite everyone to stay for supper. Pedro brought down a deer yesterday, and there's plenty to share. That sounds lovely, Eleanor said. I'll help Rose prepare. You'll rest, Yates corrected gently. Doctor's orders, remember, I'll help Rose. Eleanor started to protest, but stopped at the concern in his eyes. Yates had been protective since learning of her pregnancy, insisting she reduce her teaching hours and rest frequently. His concern was touching, if occasionally frustrating to a woman accustomed to independence. All right, she conceded. I'll sit here and enjoy the view while you two do all the work. Good plan, Rose said, standing. Come on, brother, let's see if you remember how to peel potatoes. As they bantered their way into the house, Eleanor settled more comfortably in her chair, enjoying the warm spring sunshine and the sounds of children's laughter from the corral. Her life had taken a turn she could never have predicted that tearful day on the road to the depot. But as she watched the community that had embraced her, the home she had helped build, and the future unfolding before her, she couldn't imagine wanting any other path. "Miss Eleanor," little David Parker called, running up to the porch, "look what I found." He held up a perfect eagle feather, his face alight with pride. "That's wonderful, David," Eleanor praised. "Where did you find it?" "By the creek," he explained. "Mr. Yates says eagles represent freedom. Is that true?" Eleanor smiled at the child's earnest question. "Yes, I believe it is. Eagles soar above the earth, seeing everything, going wherever they choose." David considered this seriously. "Like you did, coming all the way from Boston," the innocent observation startled her. "I suppose so, in a way," David nodded, satisfied with her answer. "I'm going to keep it forever," he declared, carefully tucking the feather into his pocket. "To remember about freedom." As he ran back to join the other children, Eleanor felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. Yes, she had found freedom here, not the absence of constraints, but the presence of choice. The choice to teach, to love, to build a life that reflected her true self rather than others' expectations. And it had all begun with tears on a dusty road, a kind cowboy, and the simple, life-changing words, "You still have a choice."